Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify, and when you want to take conversations with your fans to the next level, Q&A and polls are the best way to get them talking. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions, and best of all, it's totally free. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started today.
Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Big Ten Football Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Guggenheim. Week 7 picks on the way. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Google, Spotify. Not on YouTube today, but make sure if you go to YouTube, make sure to subscribe at Big Ten Football Talk, the channel there. Also, make sure to send me emails, big10footballtalk@gmail.com. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Grateful for you guys. We're going to get right into it. The first game of the week, Indiana at number 2, Michigan. That's on Fox. 12 p.m. kick. It's the Big Noon Kick with Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt. Best broadcast team in college football. Michigan's a 33.5 point favorite. The over-under is 44.5. And I got to tell you, I don't see how Indiana's going to score in this game. I think this could be a very similar result to what happened against Minnesota last week, where maybe Indiana gets a couple of big plays, but then Michigan maybe gets a pick six, maybe gets a fumble return for a touchdown, and it just kind of avalanches. I just think this Michigan team is too tough on both sides of the line. I think they're finding the groove offensively, which I'll get to a comment by one of the listeners here at the end of the score predictions. But I just think Michigan is too tough, and they're a team that once they start rolling, it's like an avalanche. You can't stop it. So I like Michigan big in this game. I think they cover. I actually think they get over the over. I think it'll be 45-6. Michigan covers, and it's an over. 12 o'clock on Peacock. Number 3, Ohio State at Purdue. Of course, the rankings, they reflect the AP poll because the AP poll is relevant, right? Ohio State is a 19.5 point favorite over the Boilermakers. This is a weird one for me because most listeners know I'm an Ohio State fan. And Ohio State has lost, I believe, 4 times in the past 18 years or so at Ross-Ade Stadium. And it's not like Ohio State, it's not like Purdue had great teams, right? 2004, Purdue upset them at home. That was when Kyle Orton was the quarterback. Troy Smith was just getting a start. 2009, It was a weird game where Ohio State was the better team, but they played just awful in that game. And Purdue was able to pull the upset in 2009. 2011, that was the dumpster fire year for Ohio State, and Purdue was able to get the win in overtime. And then 2018 was the Rondale Moore game. And I think it was Knox, the running back, who ran for 3 touchdowns. And I still remember that wide receiver. I just said Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore just going wild. That last play where he is being tackled and the tackler can't actually tackle him. and he gets through and he scores and it's a blowout. Purdue is tricky to play for Ohio State. Like, since Jim Tressel, every coach that has coached at Ohio State, Tressel, Fickle, and Urban, have all lost at Ross-Ade Stadium. This is, I believe, the first time that Ryan Day is going to Ross-Ade. So as a fan, I'm like, upset possibility. They've got Penn State next week. They might be looking ahead. I think the more I look at this as an analyst, anything can happen, right? Any given Sunday. I don't think Purdue is built to beat a team like Ohio State. I think their strength is their pass rush, and I think Ohio State actually does a pretty good job against the pass rush. I think their run blocking stinks, but I think they have enough at the tackle spot in terms of pass protection that they'll be okay there. Travion Henderson most likely is going to be back. I think Purdue's strength on offense is really throwing the ball. I think, Maccabee's a good complement in the running game, but he's not, they're not going to make their hay running the ball. And so I just don't think they're going to be able to run effectively enough to keep their offense on the field. I think Ohio State's defense, their back seven, particularly their safeties and their corners, I think have played exceptional this year. And they don't have receivers like they just saw at Maryland. So I think Ohio State wins. It's going to be a sloppy game. Most likely there's going to be some bad weather in this game. So I think it'll be lower scoring. 34-17. Ohio State does not cover. I think Purdue stays in here for a little bit, but I think it is a bad matchup for them, and I think Ohio State pulls away in the second half. I think similar to what we saw with Maryland. So 34-17, Ohio State over Purdue. Also at 12 o'clock, Big Ten Network, Michigan State at Rutgers. And I am excited to see what Rutgers does in this game. Rutgers is a 4.5-point favorite. It is in Piscataway. Possibly some rain, possibly some thunderstorms. So definitely some weather to consider. But the reality is Rutgers wants to run the ball. They want to establish the run with Wimsatt and Manangai. And while I think Michigan State does have a bit more talent than maybe people realize, they are really hurting. A lot of injuries. There's also a lot of buzz that Kaiten Hauser might be the starter over Noah Kim. So I'm curious how that works out. I think Rutgers gets the dub. I think it's low scoring. I like Rutgers 17-10. So the over-under is 39. I like the under, and I think Rutgers covers in this game. 17-10, low scoring. Rutgers gets their fifth win. 3:30 p.m. kick on the Big Ten Network. Massachusetts, UMass, taking on number 6 Penn State. Penn State is a 41.5-point favorite. Very nice of the Big Ten and for Penn State to have 2 bye weeks before the Ohio State game. This is going to be a bloodbath. I think Penn State comes out. They want to come out fast. They want to come out in rhythm. They want to get ready for that big matchup in Columbus next week. I think Drew Aller has a good game. I think the defense suffocates Massachusetts. I like 56-0 Penn State over UMass. It's going to be a bloodbath. 3:30 kick on NBC. Illinois at Maryland. Maryland, obviously, they were in it with Ohio State for a good chunk of that game, and that the score of 37-17 is very deceptive. I think Illinois' defense will make some plays in this game. I really do. Maryland is a 14-point favorite. It's at College Park, and I think Illinois just has a lot of key injuries. Josh McCray has been ruled out for the rest of the season with a neck injury. Reggie Love may be out of this game, and so you're down several running backs. The offensive line is a mess. I think the defense is good, not great. I think Maryland wins. I don't know if they cover. I think it's hard to come back against it's tough to play a game in conference after you have an emotional game the week before. And I think there was a lot of emotions in Columbus for Maryland last week. That being said, I do think Maryland controls the emotions. I think Tagovailoa has a good game, has a good bounce back game. I like Maryland to win this game 35-17. I think Maryland covers and they get back in the win column. They become bowl eligible with this win. And then 4 p.m. on Fox, big West showdown. Iowa at Wisconsin. Wisconsin is a 10-point favorite. I think we find out a lot about Wisconsin in this game, right? Because I think we still have questions because of Wisconsin's loss to Washington State. I think we have a lot of questions, not just because of Washington State, but because you're still trying to figure out who you are as an offense, right? You have this air raid scheme, but you also have this power running game. You have new coaching with Fickle and Phil Longo. They're still trying to figure things out. Can Wisconsin just wisely navigate the ball down the field without turning the ball over? I think that's the key to this game because Iowa really does not have the ability to stretch the field on offense. Remember, Cade McNamara out for the rest of the season, torn ACL. A lot of their other offensive playmakers are out. Luke Lachey out for the rest of the season. You have a lot of players on the offense that are out. A wide receiver didn't make a catch last week against Purdue. It's in Camp Randall. I think Wisconsin wins. I think they win big in this game, and I think they establish themselves. On the Maryland broadcast, a lot of people were saying that Maryland's the fourth best team in the Big Ten. I think Maryland re-announces itself as a player at the top of the conference next week or this Saturday. Now, because I know Yankee Wolverine, I know you're gonna give me some business for saying that, but I'm just throwing this. When I say top, I mean top 4. I don't mean top 3. I still think Wisconsin is clearly a cut below. I think Maryland is a cut below the big 3. But the reality is I think Wisconsin does announce itself as more in that upper second tier of the Big Ten than more of the middle of the pack like maybe the rest of the Big Ten West. I like Wisconsin to win 28-10. Wisconsin covers, and I think even 28-10, that sounds low scoring. I think for the type of teams that these are, I don't think it's close. I think Wisconsin gets up big and stays up big. So that's the picks. I want to get to a comment, and you guys were a little silent this past week. I don't have a lot other than a lot of well wishes from fans. Yankee Wolverine, again, he messaged me during the Ohio State game asking me how I felt about Trey Henderson being out. I actually, he asked if I thought the Trey Henderson injury would matter. And at the time I said, I don't think so. I think after seeing the running game against Maryland, I think he means more to this team than I realized because of his home run ability. So I obviously he's the best back in that backfield, but I think the fact that he can open things up as a receiver out of the backfield, but also just he can go 2 yards, 1 yard, 2 yards, 65 yards, and he can do that unlike the other backs that Ohio State has. So that was a comment. Thanks for messaging me during the game. The other one I want to get to, Matthew Greenberg on Spotify, he wrote in. And he challenged me a little bit on Maryland's offense. I said last week that I thought Maryland's offense might be the best in the conference. And his response was, give me the team with the better quarterback, the better offensive line in Michigan. And I did some research. I appreciate the comment. First off, I think Michigan, if you look at their averages, They average 9.9 yards per pass attempt, 5.1 yards per run attempt. That I believe both are tops in the conference right now. If you look at Maryland, which I said was the best offense, 7.7 yards per pass attempt, 4.7 yards per run. If you look at Ohio State, which I think would be the other team maybe in that conversation, 9.3 yards per pass attempt, 4.4 yards per run. So I think statistically, I think you can absolutely make a very sound argument that Michigan is the best offense in the conference, just by way of yards per play. And I think there is a reality, too, that because of their style of play, it's very easy to forget that they are effective offensively, right? They're very much more of they're going to wear you down and exhaust you type of team. And that's just how they play. They're not a wide open offense, although they have been more wide open. Roman Wilson has been a really effective weapon for them, 8 touchdowns over the course of the season so far. I think when I was talking about Maryland being the best offense, I was talking about a couple things. One was in the context of who Ohio State was playing. So I think in terms of offensive personnel, I would still probably pick Ohio State over everybody. And that includes Maryland, and that includes Michigan. Now, the one caveat there, I would say, is the offensive line. And I think Michigan's offensive line has been good. I don't know if I would say they've been great. And I think some of the yardage numbers that I was just rattling off is a little conflated, if I'm being honest. Because if you look at who Michigan has played, they really haven't played many good defenses. Like Rutgers was good, and I thought Rutgers did a decent job of stopping them at least early, and then the dam broke. I think against Minnesota early, Minnesota's not a great defense, but they struggled a bit offensively early. Now they got rolling, right? But if you look at who Michigan has played, there's a context to those numbers. And I think Blake Corum has been good. I think Blake Corum's starting to look like himself again. I think for the first few games, he didn't look completely healthy. I don't think he looked like he was 100. Like he looked rusty is probably the best way to put it. I think Donovan Edwards has not looked like he did last year. Now, I think that'll shift as the season goes on. I think the offensive line is still figuring things out. Compare that, and again, I said Maryland. I think if you compare that to Maryland, I think offensively, their quarterback, running back, wide receiver combo is very, 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 very good. And I would argue that just from a skill position perspective, I'd probably pick Maryland's skill positions as a combined unit over Michigan. Now, before people throw a fit, I'm not taking Roman Hemby over Blake Corum. I'm still probably not taking Roman Hemby over Donovan Edwards. I think people know my love for Donovan Edwards. I think he's the best. I think he's the best back from a talent perspective. I think he's the best back in the conference, even above Blake Corum. Although I think Corum's been more consistent. I'm thinking more from a collective perspective. It's the same thing with I think Ohio State. Their collection of skill position talent is, I think, the best, not just in the conference, but in the country, compared to Michigan, compared to everybody else. The issue, and I think, Matt, you bring up a really good point, is the offensive line. And you have to take that into consideration. But also I look at Maryland. Maryland had to play Ohio State, and their defense is supremely better than anything Michigan's faced. That brings their numbers down. Michigan has faced Notre Dame and Maryland, and Indiana for that matter. All of those defenses are better than anything Michigan has played, save for Rutgers. And that's where I think I would agree that I think from a collective standpoint, I think Michigan is very, very talented. I think part of my questions about them right now is the offensive line going to continue to figure it out? And will the wide receivers, can the wide receivers continue to grow? Can Colston Loveland continue to grow at that tight end position? I think if they do, I don't disagree with you. I think Michigan's offense is terrifying if they get everything moving. Because if the reality is they're like, I cover high school football as well, and they're like a lot of the teams I cover that are playoff worthy competitors, where their offensive line is unstoppable, their running game is unstoppable, and it doesn't matter how many good receivers you have on the other end, for the other team. It doesn't matter how high flying you are. If you can't stop the run, you're going to lose. And I think Michigan is maybe getting to that point, similar to Alabama teams of the past and even Georgia teams of the past. I think that's why they're being compared to that. I'm just not convinced they're there yet. And I think people who think Michigan is there, I think you have to remember they haven't played anyone that can challenge them yet. They haven't played a defense that can slow either part of them down. I think Rutgers did for a little bit, but they don't have the offense to then stress Michigan. And that's, I think, my question is, Michigan hasn't been stressed, and so they've been able to take their time, right? Bowling Green, they were 7-6. They were never in danger, though. But what happens if you get a game where McCarthy throws 3 picks against a Penn State, where they actually have playmakers? Are they going to start pressing? Are they going to start making more mistakes? Is the offensive line going to break down? I don't know. And I think that's a question we haven't seen yet. And so, totally, I think, Matt, it's a very reasonable thing you say. And I think overall, I think you might be right. I think you might be right in taking Michigan over the field, right? And over Maryland for sure. The issue is that Michigan has not been stressed at all. What happens when you start to stress them? They're not going to be stressed against Indiana, because it's the same problem with Indiana. If your offense can't generate anything, it helps your offense, right? Like if Michigan's defense stonewalls Indiana, which they will, Indiana's going to wear down. And so that makes the numbers look better. What happens when a team can actually possess the ball and put stress on a team where they have to go and score and they don't have the benefit of wearing a team down? That's, I think, where I'm curious about the Wolverines, because I don't think their offensive line is as good as they were last year. I don't. I think the 2 kids that came over from Stanford, they're good. They're not great. I still would pick Michigan to be the best team in the Big Ten right now. And a lot of that's just the reality that offensively and defensively, I think they are a cut above collectively. So that's I think how I'm processing. It's a great comment, because I think you're right to challenge me on it. You're right to push back on the thought about Maryland versus Michigan in terms of offensively. I'll say this last thought though. There is a reality where I think Maryland is more, explosive, particularly at wide receiver. Again, Roman Wilson is good. Cornelius Johnson is good. I don't think they're elite level talents. And while I don't think Maryland is elite level at receiver, I think they've got some dudes. I think they've got some. I think Jayshon Jones is a stud, and is probably one of the better receivers, not named Marvin Harrison and Emeka Ibuka. And that's not to take anything away from Michigan's receivers. It's just I think their receivers are not the strength of their team. And I think everybody would agree to that. Like, it's the running backs, it's the offensive line, it's the quarterback. And JJ has played most football this year out of his mind. He's been really, really good. He makes those receivers better. But I think you look at the receiver room of Maryland. I think you look at their talent collectively. I think they're underrated. I think they're really good. So, appreciate the comment. Again, I want to do more audience interaction. If you agree, awesome. If you don't agree, if you're like, I don't know what you're on, but, if you don't agree with it, that's fine. We can agree to disagree. That's the great thing about sports. But I really appreciate the comments, and obviously continue to bring in, continue to make comments, continue to leave reviews, continue to send me emails. Talk to me on X. Love the interaction, because it's an opportunity for us to talk through things. So that'll do it for this episode of the Big Ten Football Talk podcast. This is Zach Guggenheim signing off. Take care. God bless.